Hey everybody, Vicarious Viking here, back with another Rebirth update. I am a little sick right now, I'm sure you can hear it in my voice, but I, like Isaac, am not going to let a common cold get me down, so let's get started right away. First things first, we're going to take a look at some comparison shots between the original game and Rebirth. And what sticks out for me right away in this first set of pictures is just how much better the lighting and the color is in Rebirth. First of all, there's actual lighting in Rebirth, which there wasn't at all in the original game, so any lighting at all is kind of an automatic win. But yeah, it looks good, and I find the colors just pop out a lot more in Rebirth. I don't really know how to explain it, because I'm not really much of an artist or a color theory guy or anything like that, but I find in the original game they just look a lot more muted, and in Rebirth they just kind of look a lot more bright and colorful, even though that is a darker picture. I'm sure you get the idea. Another thing I noticed, and I do find this is a big one as well, is just how much more three-dimensional Rebirth looks. The walls in Rebirth have tops to them, which you can see, which I think is nice, but if you take a look at the original game, everything just looks really flat, and if you look at Rebirth, everything seems to have a lot better illusion of depth. I guess the walls are a lot more proportional, and the shading on them as well, they're darker in the corners and kind of at the bottom, and I find all of that comes together to just make it look a lot better. The only thing I find that looks a little weird, honestly, is the bottoms of the door in Rebirth seem to be way too skinny, but apparently, I do believe I read on Edmund's Q&A blog a while back that the proportions are a lot more accurate now, but the thing that doesn't make sense to me is I would assume that the top of the door and the bottom of the door have the exact same width, and now take a look at the pillars beside the door. I would assume that they have the exact same width from the top and the bottom too, but the door gets way skinnier and actually nothing else on the wall does, and I find that just looks a little bit weird. Anyway, I'm being way too nitpicky and spending way too much time on this one set of images, so let me just point out a couple other things and then we'll move on. Speaking of those pillars with the cool skulls on it to the left and the right of the door in Rebirth, take a look at the original image, take a look at the wall on the right. There's actually pillars on the wall right there, which I never even really noticed when I was playing the game, because they don't really stick out at all. They kind of almost just look like they're painted on the wall. So yes, the pillars obviously look much nicer in Rebirth. And then yeah, I find Rebirth just has a lot more little details that really put it over the top. You'll see there's a lot more bones and guts and eyeballs and stuff all over the ground. I really like that additional level of gore. And holes in the ground can sometimes have water in them now, which you can see in these images, which is cool. Anyway, let's move on to the next image. I really like this comparison shot. Once again, the colors are a big deal for me. The walls and the floor are just a lot more of a brown in Rebirth and less of like a muted purpley gray brown in the original game. I should probably mention at this point, this is all coming from someone who actually likes the art style of the original game. Just when you stack them side by side like this, the differences become really apparent, and I find you can just really see that Rebirth is much better looking, at least to me. Now then, another thing I really like in this image is the lighting effect you get from Technology's laser. You can see it's brighter all around it, and I also like how it breaks up once it hits something, in this case, a wall. Speaking of the walls again, I just want to point out the water trickling down is another nice touch. Alright, I'm thinking that's going to do it for comparison shots. There's a bunch more, but I'm not going to go through them all. I'll leave a link in the description for you guys to check out yourselves, and with that, let's move on to a very interesting new addition to Rebirth, which is Graphical Filters. The first filter we're going to be talking about is the Flash filter, which the devs actually added as a joke, but decided to make accessible from the start. For those of you who much prefer the original art style to the new one, I am obviously not in that camp, and although this filter doesn't quite make it look that much like the original, it's a decent compromise, I guess. Personally, I think it looks kind of neat, but I also think it looks kind of weird. I find this next image really shows off why I feel this way, because if you look at it, it looks fucking weird. The one on the right with the Flash filter looks smoother, but the problem is because the filter is layering over very prominent pixel art, it doesn't look smooth enough, and I find it just ends up making the whole thing look unnatural. Alright, so these next few sets of images are not from any actual filters in Rebirth. These are some fan-made mock-ups by Kingspark of how the Flash filter may have looked in Rebirth before Rebirth's Flash filter was unveiled. I personally really prefer these mock-up images to the actual Flash filter. I find everything looks messy, but in a cool way, not in an unnatural, weird way. Like, just look at those numbers. Circles look more circular and less weird and bumpy. I find this filter makes it look like more of a cool painting. I would very much like to see this filter or a very similar looking filter to this in the game, which there is a chance of because Edmund has stated that there will be tons of unlockable filters. Speaking of unlockable filters, here's one here. This is called the arcade filter, and it makes it look like you're playing on an old CRT screen. This is unlocked by entering BoobToob, B-O-O-B-T-O-O-B, into the seed code. According to bindingofisaac.com, many, if not all, filters will be accessed by using secret seed codes. Rebirth is going to feature over 50 secret codes that can be found within the game. These codes will change how the game looks, plays, sounds, etc., mostly for fun, but there are a few codes that were especially added as little challenges and or to be played in speedruns or the like. Alright, that's gonna do it for Graphical Filters. Also, I should probably mention, if you don't already know, Rebirth and the soundtrack are up for pre-order already. Rebirth is $14.99 or $10 if you own the original game, and the soundtrack is actually based on a donation with a minimum donation of $3
or $2 on Steam if you've pre-ordered Rebirth.
But if you donate $6.66 to their Bandcamp page, you get a special bonus track.
The track that you're hearing right now is actually the new Cathedral track, which was recently released, called The Everlasting Hymn, and I think that it's really cool sounding. If you'd like to hear it without me blabbing over top of it, you can find a link in the description. I'll leave links for Rebirth and the soundtrack in the description, as well as everything else, and that's going to do it for this update, everybody. I want to thank you very much for watching. If you liked it, leave a like, and you can check out my channel to find other Rebirth updates, and subscribe to be notified of when I come out with new videos. My name's Vicarious Viking. You guys have a great day, and I will see you later.